Broadcasting live from behind the lens, this is the Monstrous Feminine, the podcast where horrible humans talk about horror. My name is Tyia, and I'm joined by my camera crew,
Louisa
and Zeba. Mila's off sick today, but she'll be back, we pinky promise.
This episode's theme is found footage horror films, but before we get into it, go ahead and follow us on Spotify, YouTube, or the Apple Podcast app. You can find all of our links on our Instagram at the Monstrous Feminine Podcast and our link tree.
We will begin by tackling the iconic 1999 indie The Blair Witch Project, directed by Eduardo Sanchez and Daniel Myrick. We will then move on to talk about the first 2007 movie in the Paranormal Activity franchise, directed by Oren Peli. Finally, we will discuss a more recent take on the found footage genre, Afflicted, a 2013 Canadian film directed by Derek Lee and Cliff Prowse. Enjoy!
Okay, this is a shame because I really wanted to know Mila's thoughts on found footage horror. I don't know why, but I specifically wanted to know what she thought, like if she's a fan, but we'll have to just ask her post-migraine. But what do you guys think of found footage horror as a genre?
I really liked it when I was younger, when I believed it was real. And then since then, it has not been nearly as fun. Like, I really believed Paranormal Activity was true found footage. Like, now I'm grown and I'm like, this is bad acting. Like, I guess, like, whatever. But, like, when they have those, I don't know what you call them, warnings at the beginning of found footage movies, those always got me. Those got deep in my head. Even when people were telling me, like, oh, it's fake, like, if we went to see it at the movie theater, I would still, like, have this, like, smidgen of, like, doubt in the back of my head that, like, really scared me. And now they don't really scare me that much anymore. But I think they're cool. Like, a cool concept.
Yeah.
I am not a fan of found footage horror, which I guess is not that shocking. I think I've said this before on a previous episode. I do think it's like a great way to make like a budget horror film, like if you don't have a good budget, and it makes it very scary. So like I respect it. And I think Blair Witch did a good job and Paranormal Activity did a good job of making like a film on a small budget and recouping a ton of profits and also being able to like launch it into film history, I guess. But found footage is not really my thing. It doesn't necessarily scare me. I don't like looking at the camera angles usually. It just isn't for me. It just gives me a headache.
It is a bit, like, nauseating, especially on a big screen when the camera's really shaky.
It's interesting you say that because I don't find it nauseating. And when I read this, I thought, that's not true. But I guess you both just confirmed that my experiences are not the truth. Apparently, when some people saw the Blair Witch, like the people in the theater were like really nauseous from the camera movements and had to leave to vomit. And like ushers told people who were like prone to motion sickness to sit in the aisle so they didn't barf on anyone else.
My roommate told me that like the reason at least Blair Witch is like that, but maybe not later found footage, is that the cameras didn't have stabilizers in them yet, and that's why like it's way shakier than our handheld cameras are now. Like if people are vlogging, it doesn't look like blurry and weird anymore, but they just like didn't have that technology yet. But now like found footage is like a little bit cleaner to watch and less awful.
Do you think found footage as a genre has gotten, I guess we can actually debate this at the end once we kind of go through from old to modern, but I want to know if they have gotten scarier or not as scary, because I guess the thing that makes it scary is the lack of visibility and like the crappy quality, and Blair Witch is what makes it so like what you just said, makes it so nauseating and makes it so because you just can't see what's happening.
The thing I really think that we have improved upon with found footage is that we have so many other cameras in our world now that aren't just like if we brought a camera out, like there's cell phone, there's GoPro, there's like whatever they call it, CCTV, or like security surveillance footage, there's desktop horror, which we already did. There's so many cameras everywhere now that there's lots of different angles and like ways that you could tackle found footage horror now. I think American Horror Story season 6 Roanoke did a really good job of it, and it was definitely like an homage to Blair Witch entirely, but I loved seeing like a modern take of what would this be like if it was happening on like Facebook Live or Instagram Live, like the live aspect of it. Like I knew it was fake, but I still got like, it felt reminiscent of like when found footage horror really did scare me. Like I could imagine something like that happening. Like, even if it was just like IRL, somebody pulled out their phone because they were getting mugged or something like that. Like, that is something that could totally end up on Facebook Live or something like that. So I think that in that way, I think people have the opportunity to be way more creative than this, like, even what Afflicted did, this like fake documentary thing. It doesn't have to be a fake documentary. Like, we have footage of things all the time, and like people are filming their lives all the time now, and it's not like necessarily weird.
There was a Snapchat horror movie. It was like a YouTuber kind of cast. It's called Sick House, and it stars like Andrea Russell.
When did it come out?
2016.
That's a little late for Snapchat. I guess the youth still be using Snapchat. I don't know.
All right, I have a question. Part of catch up. Have you ever like filmed something and like watched footage and noticed something weird?
Yes, but I don't remember what it was.
Well, that doesn't help the story.
I'm trying to think. I don't be filming things. Like, I forget to take pictures when I go out places.
If I notice like anything that seems paranormal, I literally delete it and I'm like, bye.
You know what? I was rewatching Paranormal Activity, which we'll get to, but say it now. I realized like how I must have watched it. I mean, it came out in 2007. I think I watched it like right then, because I realized that so much of my fear and my behaviors are like directly attributed to this film. Like I know it's like a common thing to not have your leg dangling over the bed, but I don't do it specifically because of this film.
Even the trailer, they showed that part. I remember so viscerally being a kid and seeing that trailer when the leg gets like dragged out. That was it for me. I was like, oh, I 100% believe.
I don't ever want CCTV footage in my house. I don't ever want to record like footage of me sleeping. Like, I was simply like, ignorance is bliss. I would never record it because of this movie. This movie like got to me.
It got to a lot of people.
This movie is definitely scary though.
Do you know anybody who has an Amazon Ring, like the thing on the front of their door? It's like a camera that is supposed to be like to track your Amazon packages when the delivery person comes. That and like smart homes and everything. I want to see, and maybe there is one and I'm not thinking of, but I would like to see a horror movie that's like entirely people's like surveillance that they put up. Or even like something about like Amazon Ring kind of scares me. I'm like, that's a company that you just let like see your, but it also like allows Amazon to see everybody coming to your front door, anybody coming to visit you. And they use it for like crime investigations a lot. Same with like Google Homes and Alexas that like pick up audio of home invasions. They use it to solve a lot of crimes actually, but it's like 100% recording you all the time. And I think that like that as a premise is scary of like, what if the company were to abuse that? Or what if like a home, like somebody hacked into your system and used your cameras against you and like figured out when you weren't home and like broke it. I think about it a lot.
We just straight up pitch so many movies ideas on this podcast, and we gotta start copywriting our shit, man. Like, someone's gonna come out with this in like 3 years time and we're gonna be like, I
The Monstrous Feminine is on Apple Podcasts, so please go leave us a 5-star review. If you do, you might just get a shout out on our next episode as our Witch of the Week. This episode, our Witch of the Week is Male Phobia from Canada, and they said, love this podcast. It's funny, it's relevant, and the hosts are amazing. You should definitely give this podcast a try if you're a fan of horror movies. Thank you so much, Mel. We really appreciate that, and we hope you have a wonderful spooky season and you get to eat tons of pumpkin treats and have a happy Halloween, even though it's not Halloween yet, and we will definitely speak to you before then.
I hope you get lots of compliments on your costume if you have one, and lots of compliments on yourself.
And FYI, we also are on Patreon, so for £1 a month, you gain access to our Discord. For £3 a month, you also get to see what we cut out of our episodes with an additional episode that is uncut. And for £5, you get all of that plus a bonus episode. If you enjoy our podcast, please support us, and any contribution helps. If you're one of our listeners from the US, please understand that these prices will change and are not necessarily equal to $1, so it could be more or less depending on what your currency is. So thank you so much.
In the Blair Witch Project, 3 students travel to the backwoods in Maryland to make a documentary investigating a local legend involving witchcraft, which is believed to be the cause of multiple deaths and disappearances in the area. Things take a turn for the worst when they become lost. They begin hearing movement outside of their tent and children's laughter, and they stumble upon strange figurations such as piled stones and stick figures. When one of them goes missing, things really start to go haywire.
The creepiest story about her that I ever heard was that two men were out hunting, and they were camped near the cabin or something that she's supposed to haunt. And they disappeared off the face of the earth.
Really?
Okay, it's all right, Ingrid. I'm just telling a scary story, but it's not true.
So I found some fun facts. As you said in the kind of catch up, it was like one of the highest, I think it was number 1 for films that have made the most, like, based on like investment return. Like, they were quite cheap to make and they made like a lot of money. And it was one of the most like successful independent movies, was the highest. And Blair Witch only took 8 days to shoot. And then my favorite, I think it's really interesting because apparently the whole thing was improv. So like they just gave them an idea of the script and they convinced the actors that it was real, like the whole story. All the people that they interviewed at the start, the actors thought were like townspeople, but apparently they were just plants.
Really?
By the director. Yeah, so that they were interviewing them thinking it was like, oh, I guess they have heard about this legend.
Wait. When you say that they tricked them, did they think they were lost in the woods for days, or did they think that...
The way they did this was the directors stayed or the crew members stayed close to them, but they were far away and they spoke, they were close, but not like in the near vicinity, basically. And they communicated via walkie-talkie. And they were given like, I think, a map and like points to like meet and shoot at different areas. And apparently one scene where they're like, we've been walking all this time and we're back where we started. That was actually a real thing that happened. Like they walked for hours and they ended up back where they started. So that was like apparently genuine frustration rather than something that was scripted. Essentially like nothing was really scripted.
Wait, so what did they think they were doing? Did they think they were filming a documentary, that somebody had hired them to do a documentary?
Yeah, they thought they were just making a film, like a fake documentary, but they thought like, you know, it was based on like a real legend, but they were just kind of acting out a fake documentary. So they were on set and they would like be in the tent and like if there would be like little surprises, like when they go outside and like tap and like make noises and stuff, that was like their genuine reaction because they were surprised by that. Like they weren't expecting the directors to do these things and the crew members to like make these sounds and do these things. When Josh goes missing, they have him in the studio and they play his recording in the woods to like freak him out. It was also marketed as a true story. Like I think we all know that, but the directors put up missing person signs. Like at Cannes Film Festival, they put up missing person signs, of like the actors in the film. The girl, I think her name's Heather, the actress, her mom got like phone calls being like, so sorry for your daughter's disappearance and all this stuff. Like people actually, they had a whole fake website which like had like fake cops like on the case and details and stuff of like where these actors and stuff, the disappearance. Like they made like this marketed as like it was a true story.
Someone pointed out that this movie came out, like I saw it in a YouTube comment actually, so if this was your YouTube comment and you happen to listen to this podcast, it's your lucky day. But someone pointed out that like this movie was like the first like found footage film that came out like right when the internet was really a thing for like mass public, so people were more inclined to be like on their computer looking at websites and advertisements, and they were more tuned into like the media side of a film release than they were previously, because like all the hype kind of came from like, oh my gosh, this movie has Brad Pitt or something.
Yeah, but
like this movie's hype came solely from like how freaked out people were from the missing posters and the website, and so they like were, I guess we can say it's the first horror film that I guess profited off of like the popularization of media and virality
of it. Yeah, I think it's also a lot of people who don't watch horror movies, who have never seen a horror movie, have seen Blair Witch Project. Like a lot of them, like this is the one that they like piques their interest enough to watch. I've noticed even now.
I guess because like it's not like it's scary but it's like a digestible one. Like it's quite slow, right? Like there's not a whole lot of action.
There's no gore, really. it evoked in me the same like visceral physical reaction that other horror movies do, because I'm so goddamn frustrated. Like, it really raises my blood pressure to imagine being in a situation like this. Like, I get worked up when the car is lost in the parking lot and I'm like, we are never getting out of here. Like, it's actually like a very terrifying like situation, especially with men, all men.
There's a point on that. So allegedly, like, Heather, the actress, brought a knife with her because she didn't like the idea of just like being in the woods with two men, like male actors. And she was like, I'll get this all from IMDb, so if it's wrong, like, don't sue me. But apparently, like, she also was fearful that it might actually be a snuff film. Like, she was like going to the woods to film something that might actually be a snuff film because also they were like very much hyping it up and like acting like it was real and stuff. It would have been kind of creepy to be on set. And I think she had a lot of backlash and then eventually like didn't, from this performance, and then eventually like didn't, like, kind of quit acting.
None of them come off very like well by the end of it. Like, the guys are annoying mostly because they like outnumber her, and I can imagine like that must be the worst. Like, what, like that map situation when he said he like kicked the map into the creek, that is really what like sent me to the great beyond in like my levels of frustration. But she is also mad annoying. Like, the way that she won't put down the camera, she puts it in their face when they're like having these emotional breakdowns or having these moments when they just like want to have with themselves, and she's like, the movie is all I have. Fine, girl, film yourself. But like, people are trying to like sort through their emotions, and she's like sticking a camera in their face.
I feel like that's a fatal flaw with like, that's something that irks me about the genre, because no matter what, like, especially if it's like this documentary style like we talked about, or like whatever, they have to be some kind of annoying protagonist to justify why they keep filming everything, and it's always a bit of a reach, and no one would reasonably.
I don't know, there are some weird people on YouTube though who really do film things that they shouldn't.
Yeah, there are. No, like vloggers and stuff, but they're not pleasant. Like, that's what I mean. Like, I feel like the protagonist is kind of always going to be iffy.
I want to say that they turn on each other quickly in this film, because the movie is an hour and 20 minutes, so I think that like it I don't know, it feels like it speeds up very quickly. Like, the situation escalates. Like, there's a midpoint where like the panic sets in and like their interpersonal horror escalates, and then there's like another sort of climactic point in the last like 10 minutes when things sort of escalate in horror. But they do turn on each other quickly, and you do get the sense that they're not friends. Like, they're people who are like, if they do empathize with each other, it's in this like very humanistic way where they think they're gonna die, and like you kind of have to like, if this is, especially when Josh goes missing and it's just the two of them and they only have each other, and they have these like moments where all they can do is like hold each other and like, you know, have these like existential moments where they're looking at the stars. They're like, oh, I would love a cheeseburger right now. Like, that felt like very human, and like they sort of like reconcile their things. But I did get the sense that like, if they were close friends going into this, a lot of this like turning on each other would not have happened. Like, they didn't like each other from the get. And I think that like, that kind of tension made me feel like that was the horror to me. I was like, this is scary.
Yeah, they were research students though, and I think like an element of being a student is like a competitiveness that doesn't necessarily exist when you get out of like the rat race of school, particularly when you're in like postgraduate degrees. Like, there's a level of competitiveness for like money, for grants, and for opportunities, and so their underlying competitiveness definitely, I think, was a reason why they turned on each other so quickly. Whereas like in the other situations, the people were dating, or they were like best friends who were like on a vacation together, so like there was no real reason to turn on each other. But also like, just I feel like in Afflicted, one of the myths was just how calm his friend was, but like, you're a vampire.
In Afflicted, but also in Blair Witch, actually in all of these, I have a question for y'all. At what point do you, as a sane and rational person, accept that the situation is supernatural?
Immediately.
I mean, once he punched the wall.
Children's laughter, probably, that point. Like, that was like, there's not a bunch of kids in the woods.
But you wouldn't think that you were like delusions or anything like that, that you were like hungry?
No, because I'm not I don't think I'd be, I kind of trust my peace of mind, and I've had some sort of like paranormal encounters before, which I did originally write off as delusion, and they came back to not be delusion. So I was like, when my friend then had the same kind of experience. So I was a bit like, I kind of trust my intuition. If it feels supernatural, then it's supernatural. Like, I'm kind of gullible anyways, but like in general, I'm going to trust my gut, and I'm a believer in such things. So if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, I'm going to say it's a
I do feel like they all took
duck.
a very long time to like come to the conclusion that something was afoot.
Like, wait, is it actually a witch? What? Are you kidding?
Why do they keep returning to this? Like, we're in America, there's nowhere you can get lost in America anymore. I'm like, are you serious? This is huge
before,
country.
Like, cell phones as well.
This is a huge country. You can absolutely get lost in most of America.
Not even just America, like any vast woodland space, like you're gonna fuck up and like get lost if you're not used to this.
When I realized they were in Maryland, my instinct was to be like, oh, I would literally keep walking east until I reached the ocean. But maybe that's a delusional plan as well.
I don't know like my directions well enough to be in the woods, so
yeah. How do you know north, south, east? Oh, I guess they had a compass.
The
compass wasn't working or something. Yeah. Remind me, why did he throw it into the woods? Because I read that he was actually, so that actor was like told to do it beforehand. This is like part of the improv thing. And then he was told, the others didn't actually know, so it was kind of a genuine reaction, who would have lost the map. And then he reveals it later to get like, to gauge a reaction.
All he says is that the map wasn't helping them, and that he got the map wasn't working anyway. And then the girl this was the most frustrating bit to me, because the girl was like, it doesn't matter if it wasn't helpful to you, there's no reason to throw it out.
People always make jokes about how men are with directions, and like if they can't figure something out, they just get angry.
In this instance where the guy throws out the map, it felt like, well, now I know that they told him to do that, but I felt like an instance of just like his ego, because she was the only one who could read the map, and he's like, the map is useless, because he couldn't read it, and she kept like insisting to him. She's like, the map is useless to you. I knew where we were on the map.
To you.
Yeah. And like that felt like, I mean, the other guy was much kinder to her, but I think he was having less of a like mental health crisis than the other one. But it felt like an instance of like his ego getting like reaching an inflation point, and he just like lost it.
You know, I didn't know this from I wouldn't have got it from just watching it, but apparently a lot of people, when I was reading about it, apparently a lot of people didn't like really believe like the legend or whatever, and they thought maybe it was like a snuff film where like Mike and Josh actually co-conspired to kill Heather, and that was like the main thing that people cited of like, why would anyone, like, people just didn't believe that, like, why would he throw out the map, like, who did that serve, like, was he trying to deliberately like basically gaslight Heather and get her to this weird isolated house and plot all these things. And yeah, so that was like one thing that people thought happened, that it was a snuff film and that they killed Heather and that there was no Blair Witch.
Is the Blair Witch like a real myth, or is it was completely made up for the movie?
They made it up, completely made up. But people thought it was people were so convinced that all like the wackos like who love to film these things and seek them out with like a green light camera at night, like flooded to that town in Maryland to try to like capture something, but quickly found out that it wasn't real. The actors also didn't have, like, on their IMDb pages, it deliberately said that they were missing. So like they really like kept this up.
Wow.
For a year, I think. Until
this was like how everything is like always scarier when it feels like it's based on a true story. Like if I can write something off in my head as being fantasy, I'm like, that's not that scary. But like something about anytime you're watching a horror movie, even if it's like something not even that scary.
I had like one more, I guess, question or point. That part where he's like, I see why you like this video camera so much. It's not quite reality. Like he says that literally, and then he like says a little bit more, and he has like a monologue about it when they're fighting about like why she keeps sticking the camera in people's face, and he steals the camera and starts like filming for himself. And then after that point, after he says that, and it sort of like breaks the fourth wall a little bit, and like what they know and don't know, and like what the intention of the film is, and like what they want you to be thinking about like what is real and what isn't. Like that point onward in the movie, I like watch it very differently than the first half, because like it's this acknowledgement on the part of both the character and the actor that like this is meant to like toy with your sense of like how much of this is real and how much of these emotions are like. I think when you're in front of a camera, you're always acting a little bit. Like if you're aware that you're being filmed, there's like like it's just human instinct to like, that it'll be watched later and you're like self-conscious of it. So that made me feel like even if this was like 100% true, they are putting it on a little bit for the camera. Or now in Louisa, what you've said about like some of these emotions were real and the filmmakers made an environment where they like actually felt fear or frustration. Now that line feels like a little like even more like sinister a little bit.
I think, yeah, I was just about to say, like, basically because the actors are just being like kind of manipulated and gaslit and like tricked the whole time anyway throughout the whole filming process.
They did that with Nomadland, where like some of the scenes where she was in the Amazon factories, none of the people knew that they were shooting a movie and that she was not really an Amazon worker. Which I feel like when you do stuff like that, technically it's very... If it's like if a PhD student would not get their degree if they did it, you shouldn't do it in a movie. That's honestly the rule of thumb that I think is a thing. Like if you would not get a degree because of the ethics or something, then you should not be able to do it in a movie.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of horror movies like cross that boundary without even meaning to, especially with child actors who get fucked up by things that they experience in the filming process. Like I don't think it's the intention of the directors to traumatize them, but like it happens. Like people's boundaries of what is real and what is fake, even for adults, gets like blurred in the process of filming these things.
Apparently the final scene, Heather said was, or maybe not said, but on IMDb, was so emotional that she was like crying about it like weeks after the filming stopped. So like you're right to be kind of unnerved as a viewer, seeing as you're watching a very disorientated cast try to navigate the situation, also believing this lie of a film. Also, yeah, it's kind of bizarre. My last fun fact was that there was this, when she shouts, "What the fuck is that?" They were meant to pan to like some crew member dressed in like, he was wearing a white gown in the distance and like running, but like because like one of the actors was like holding the camera, he forgot to pan to it, so you never see the witch, and that kind of would have ruined it completely because like the genius was like that you don't see her, so if you just saw this random guy like in the distance running with a gown, it would have been
so funny
so
that like
stupid.
the like iconic thing about this and like the genius of like the horror where you don't see the scary thing that like this thing gets credit for was completely an accident.
Yeah, well, I'm not too sure because it also said it was inspired by Jaws, where you don't see the thing.
We see the Jaws.
So I was like, so what is the truth? But you know how it's like signaled beforehand with the yellow barrels and stuff, or not yellow barrels, sorry, but like with people diving underneath in the first opening scene, like when she gets pulled under, and like certain other instances, like it's kind of hinted at before it's shown. It's only shown like halfway through or something like that.
When the people who made Jaws, if they saw the Meg, then they would be intimidated and they would know they had to make him bigger.
Come on, Meg.
Are you saying like a basically dick measure and dick contest but with
it
sharks?
It needs to be bigger because we're not intimidated
like
anymore.
Emasculated by the Meg.
I insisted that we keep going. I insisted that we walk south. Everything had to be my way. And this is where we've ended up. And it's all because of me that we're here now. Hungry and cold and hunted.
In the first Paranormal Activity, young couple Kate and Micah have just moved in together when they start experiencing unexplained occurrences in their home, such as strange whispers and loud bangs. Micah documents everything that happens using a new camera which he sets up beside their bed every night. Kate reveals that these kind of strange supernatural phenomena used to happen to her and her sister when they were younger. Micah consistently dismisses Kate's fears of a demonic presence until things turn so sinister even he can no longer ignore it.
You promised me you weren't going to, don't you look at me like that. You promised me you weren't going to mess with that stuff.
No, I promised you I wasn't going to buy a Ouija board.
Oh,
I didn't buy a Ouija
you
board.
knew exactly what I meant.
I borrowed a
How
Ouija board.
dare you? You knew exactly what I meant. I said don't mess with that stuff because it scared me. What do? You go out and you get the best looking fucking Ouija board I've ever seen and you put it in the middle of our living room? Explain that to me.
Micah was like annoying in this film, but he was also a ride or die because I mean, if my partner was like there's a demon haunting me, it has been since I was a child, I think I would probably peace out.
He does have a meltdown about it, rightfully so. Like, he was like, you didn't tell me? We moved in together, you didn't tell me about this. I would have had the biggest bitch fit you've ever seen.
I feel like I've been tricked.
Lied, bamboozled.
If somebody told me early in the relationship, I think it's something we could work on. I would immediately like get a spiritual advisor. I would at least help you to attempt to remove the demon from your spirit.
I'm out.
Zeba, you are loyal.
I'm simply out. I think I've exposed myself as not a ride or die on here, but it's fine.
Imagine having a demon attached to you and nobody wants to date you. It would be really sad.
That's a personal problem.
I feel like we just watch, especially with Fear Street too, like they weren't even together, they were exes, and we just watch films where people are like obscenely loyal, and I'm just like, I'm simply like, I don't understand.
The man in this movie is awful.
Yeah, he should have just left her. Like, why are you gonna make her feel like shit all the time and like dismiss her? He's like consistently.
The thing I mean, this is probably definitely supposed to get to you, and was the excuse for why he was like filming all the time when they weren't sleeping, was he like really wanted to make a sex tape. He was so excited to be dropping hints. He wanted to make that sex tape, and she repeatedly said no. But that was his reason for like carrying the camera around all the time. I'm like, what do you think she's about to strip right here, right now? I know that I'm always comparing horror to porn, but this was a porn set house. Like, I know that, like, I'm sure it was, like, low budget, and that they, like, have these houses that are, like, already furnished for rent.
This was his house. No. This was Oren Peli's, the director's house. I
refuse.
He had several... No.
This is a porn house.
No, but basically, this was his own house. He got the idea because a box of detergent fell off a shelf, and it was not close to the edge of the counter, so he was like, why did it fall? So he started thinking of a film, and he spent a year redecorating his house and like repainting and adding a railing.
What would be the headline for this? Like he's definitely trying to like have a setup, and it's like, man tries to have amateur sex tape with girlfriend, but instead sees ghost, and it's like all caps, and it's on Pornhub. Like, that's what I kept picturing that he wanted to happen.
She did have this is gonna be don't know if I should say it, but she did have like she's a very well endowed actress, and I feel like there were a lot of like close up like chest shots of her to like really emphasize that, so I can kind of see what you're talking about. She was busty. What's a respectful way of saying that? I really don't know. I don't have boobs, and if I did, maybe I'd know a respectful way to talk about them. I simply don't.
Big mommy milkers is the respectful terminology, actually.
Because Zeba made the porn point, that I was like, it did feel a little bit of like a lot of close up kind of boob shots, which I don't really, other than that, I don't think her breasts are relevant.
The boyfriend looked like Ben Shapiro. I want you to sit with that.
Apparently the actors were only paid $500 for this film each.
I believe it.
They renegotiated when it blew up, but I was like, that's wild. They made it with $500.
Did Afflicted have music in it? Because the thing that I noticed most that like made it feel real to me is that neither of these had like a score, music, sound effects of any kind. And those, like I've said before, like those are normally the things that scare me. But I think that like that added to the authenticity of it, that there were these like moments of like dead ass silence, or just like maybe you hear like a shuffling around or something, but like it made all the sound intentional. Like I was never questioning, is this something I'm meant to be hearing? I'm meant to be hearing all of it. It's not like a weird glitch in the score, or like an instrumental that's like kind of sounds like something in the other room or something like that. I think it like attuned my ears to it. I can't remember if Afflicted had music, but it did feel like more edited, especially in the parts where they're like setting up the vlog, so that like the rest of it felt like also more staged. I mean, we can get to Afflicted. I'm still back on like general found footage as well, but like with Afflicted, the year it was made was like Vlog Central. I forget, was it 2014? It was when it came out. 2013. Like YouTube was a very different place than like, I know you don't want me to talk about Slender Man, but there's something about like found footage that they let the audience find has like a completely different effect on people. Like 100% people thought that was real, because like it is 80 hours of unedited clips like, and they just let you sort through it yourself, and like almost in a way that like horror video games are, like a choose your own adventure type of thing. And it really like I think it enacts people's like the same fascination people have with true crime, where they're like, I'm gonna figure this out, I'm gonna like see the thing that's moving in the background that no one else is gonna see, and like put all the timelines together and like figure shit out and do whatever. There's an element of like YouTube where people do that a lot, and like that is its own genre of found footage because people make fake versions of that. But this like vlog style to me is not like, and it feels the same as Blair Witch and the same as Paranormal Activity, in that like it lets the audience do the work of like finding out what is scary, whereas like something hyper edited like a vlog, I'm like, well, this isn't fun at all. You're pointing the camera at the scary thing and showing me what it is. I don't get to do any sleuthing.
I think the acting in Paranormal Activity and Blair Witch, I guess, is like really good, considering it was like all improv and stuff.
It feels bad. It feels bad if it was scripted, but
it feels like a real video that people would make and how she would act.
Something that like added to the authenticity of like these last two that we've been talking about, I think as well, is that they look a little bit uncomfortable on camera. Like when they know that the camera's pointing at them, sometimes they like look directly at it or like will speak directly to it in a way that like other movies just would never have the opportunity for that to happen. So like all these times where he's like not believing her and they're having fights and he's like, in the same way with Blair Witch, where she's like pointing the camera at them when they're like having a moment of distress. I get the sense that like this doesn't feel like an actor because she wants you to turn the camera off. Like she looks uncomfortable that this is being recorded.
I wanted to ask you guys what you think more about Mika and his machismo, because I was like so like how he spoke to the demon was like really just jarring to me. I wrote down like a myriad of like quotes, but he's like, "Is this all you got? You're worthless. This is my house. You're my girlfriend." He was talking to Kate then. He's like, "You're gonna fuck with us? Show yourself. I'll take care of it." You know, it's very much like he talks about it as if it's like an actual man in the house who's just like somehow hidden. And it's very much wrapped up in his own masculinity. Like especially at one point Kate says, "You're powerless, like what are you doing?" He gets like riled by that comment because it's like I think it honestly upsets his like ego or something. And I thought that was interesting given like what Creed says on possession, which is she's speaking about The Exorcist, but possession was like an excuse for women to act out taboos and particularly of a sexual nature. So if you're considering that kind of sexual element here, obviously like Kate doesn't want anything to do with it, but I think there is like an element because of how he acts when he's treating this demon almost as it's like a male rival gonna hurt his girlfriend kind of thing. I feel like it adds like a sexual element to like the whole possession as an allegory for rape and horror kind of conversation that we've had before. So yeah, I just thought that was really weird how his like male ego is like wrapped up in treating this as if it's like a male burglar or a male home invader and not a supernatural demonic force, which it clearly is.
I don't understand how like him and Kate had been in a racial relationship for years and it never came up previously that she might be being haunted by a supernatural entity. Like, he never spent the night at her house.
They explain it in the second one.
The universe has a lot of lore. Like, there's, like, many, like, prequel type of movies, where they, like, go back to, like, how the haunting started and give all that context.
I actually think, in terms of Paranormal Activity franchises, I mean, I think after number 2, it's a bit, or no, even number 3, rather, it gets a bit, like, stupid. But I would say that 1 and 2 are like, that's a prequel, sequel kind of Paranormal Activity 2 that I actually really like. And I think they did a lot to like give and weave in backstory in a way that made sense.
It was a movie that like begged for a prequel. Like they didn't give us no context really in this one.
They were straight up like, she's haunted, there's a demon, you're gonna deal with it for this whole film. But they went back and they explained it really well. And, like, I like the fact, like, the whole idea of, like, the sister was, the sister had the demon and got possessed, and her husband, like, transferred it to Kate. And then the storylines happen simultaneously for a little while. And then Kate goes and kidnaps the sister's son because someone back in time made a sacrifice or a deal with the devil or whatever, apparently to sacrifice the firstborn son, and he was the first one that cropped up in their gene pool.
They said hereditary.
Honestly, but in the third one, they even have a secret cult that happens. So, like, a secret woman cult. There are 3 alternate endings. In number one is the longest and kind of wild, and it involves some sort of shootout. But basically, she carries Mika's body, throws it at the camera, kind of similar. She returns to the bedroom alone. She uses a knife to kill Mika, and then she sits against the bed and like rocks back and forth. Her friend comes and discovers Mika's body downstairs, calls the police. Police come. They find possessed Kate playing with this knife. She suddenly snaps out of her demonic possession, asks about Mika. Some more like a door slams by itself. Officer panics, accidentally shoots and kills her, and fades to black.
Wow, is it an abolitionist alternate ending?
It's a really weird one. Yeah, and so the camera fades to black. The police can try to look for the source of the sound, but obviously there's nothing. So that was one. That was wild. So that was the original one. Alternate ending is that Katie, after killing Mika off screen, comes back upstairs alone, and she closes the bedroom door, approaches the camera, faces the camera, slits her own throat, and commits suicide. And then she drops to the floor, and the camera fades to black. And then a brainstormed ending that never got shot was that Kate would corner Mika, bludgeon him to death with his camera, and the viewers would be in like POV watching him die. But that was thought to be too complicated.
I think they chose the right ending. The ambiguity of it is good enough for me. I didn't really need to know what happened.
As soon as I Googled it to see how many movies it was, I saw that they said Steven Spielberg told them which ending to choose.
How did they know him?
I don't know.
That's something I would lie about in an interview. I'd be like, yeah, me and Steven, we're close.
Just like name drop someone random. I think Steven Spielberg said he was a really big fan of the film, though, so I think he probably did have some involvement or something like that.
Yeah, we kind of touched on the hype around this film a little bit when we were doing our initial catch up, but I feel like I remember this movie being a big deal when it came out. Like, maybe when, like, because a lot of people really did believe it, and I think a lot of it had to do with the promotion and the trailers and that, you know, the message that they put at the beginning, like, you know, that sort of implies that this is real or true, and it's, yeah. But I feel like not since Blair Witch have people really, like, maybe the, like, Exorcist before that, have people had, like, a reaction like this to a horror movie. Like, it really was, a sensation, truly.
Yeah, it was huge. I remember in high school it was like the big thing for everyone to go watch these movies in theaters.
But I'm surprised that we didn't get more found footage horror after it. Like, they just, like, ran the game and did all their sequels pretty much, and we didn't see very many, like, if there were, they weren't particularly popular. So, like, it felt like a sort of flash in the pan situation. After this, it was, like, all about franchises. It was all about, like, Insidious, Conjuring, Sinister, all of those that, like, sort of had these, like, tight universes. I think that strategy works really well for the studios, and like depending on the like I will probably, like, if I enjoy the first out of a franchise, I'm probably gonna see the rest. Maybe not necessarily in theaters, but like I've seen all of the Conjurings. They've gotten worse over time, and it's like that's a bummer. But like I think those are like the money makers, and I think Paranormal Activity, if not setting off like a found footage revolution, 100% like an extended universe franchise revolution.
I definitely think they made people realize, like, if you can get people hooked on a concept, you can make infinite amount of monies on it.
But then people were doing that with Friday the 13th. They were doing that with like all kinds of like older ones, but like I think people had gotten bored with it.
They didn't make Friday the 13th close enough together where people cared.
But Paranormal Activity felt like every year for a decade there was a new Paranormal Activity.
I've pretty much heard people say up until 3, people say they're pretty good.
I think there should have just been 3.
Which, I mean, that's still a lot to accomplish because The Hangover was not good up until 3 movies.
That's the bar we measure all trilogies by, actually.
I think Paranormal was, like, good just because, you know how you were saying, Zeba, that there was, like, a kind of evolution within found footage horror as we had different mediums. Paranormal Activity was good at doing that. Like, it did, like, first a handheld camera Blair Witch vibe, then it did security CCTV in the next one, and the third one, I can't remember, I think it was like home videos. Yeah, home videos and stuff, so it went a bit more back in time vintage. But I think in the fourth one, like, some of it's filmed on, like, it's actually a desktop horror. I think it's filmed on, like, half on the the teenage girl's laptop or something. Probably actually was one of the first desktop horrors, now come to think of it. Forgot to mention it in the episode. I think Unfriended was the one that was, like, huge, put it on the map. But I guess Paranormal Activity must have done it first, depending on when that fourth one came out.
I think I'm doing more harm being here than any good. Yes, I really have got to leave. And Dr. Avery's will be back in a few days, and when he gets back here, he'll take care of all the problems.
What should we do? Should we leave? Should we?
Leaving won't help at all. Let me see what I can do, but I've got to leave this room right now.
This is no joke.
I will help you, but I can't do this right now.
In Afflicted, two friends, Derek and Cliff, decide to travel the world and vlog their experience, despite the fact that Derek has an AVM and could die any moment. While in Barcelona, Derek goes home with a woman he meets at a bar named Audrey. Cliff later discovers him in the hostel with deep scratches and wounds all over him and Audrey nowhere to be found. The pair assume it was a robbery and move on to Italy. Derek stops eating food, develops a sensitivity to sunlight, adopts superhuman strength, and starts experiencing an intense craving for blood. All the while, Cliff documents Derek's evolution and uploads the videos to their platform. Cliff deduces that Derek has become a vampire and they attempt to find him a supply of blood by breaking into a blood bank and hijacking an ambulance. Eventually, Derek's hunger puts him in a monstrous catatonic trance, during which he attacks and fatally wounds Cliff. Upon feeding, Derek breaks out of the trance. Interpol agents begin hunting Derek down for his previous crimes, all captured by the videos, which now have gone viral. Meanwhile, Derek continues to film everything to honor Cliff, and he goes on the hunt for Audrey, believing she will know the cure to his condition.
All right, I'm Cliff Rose. And I'm Derek Lee, and tomorrow we're going on a year-long trip around the world!
We're going to film the entire thing, and we're going to post it online as a travel blog.
It's going to be epic.
I feel like I've seen several movies recently with vampirism and people are convinced there's a cure in each one. And I'm like, well, I mean on The Sims there actually is, and you can make it at the bars once you master the vampire skill. That's relevant.
I just think like there's nothing in lore, I think, to suggest that there's a cure, right? So why do they immediately, I don't know why he's so insistent on like undoing it. You know what? There was that disease. I think it's Porphyria's disease, which was associated with vampirism, or like a lot of the myth about vampirism came from this myth.
Why are they so convinced that there's a cure that she has, but before it clicks that he's a vampire, why do they never go to a hospital? Like, he's having just symptoms for a while, and they never go to a hospital. They never even consider it.
I guess because he already had, like, the disease, so they probably just assumed it was, like, disease progression or something.
Okay, go get you some, like, there's things hospitals can do to, like, help your symptoms, even if you're, like, terminal. Like, why are they content to let him suffer?
There's a lot of, like, I think, reaching that we had to do, and I feel like that was one of them, because that was explained away with him, with, like, one Aggie line, where he, like, I think it's before he punches the wall, where he's like, if we go, then they'll never let me leave because of my AVM.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think, like, both in this and Blair Witch, like, these are reactions that I would expect from, like, men. I think this isn't the farthest from the truth reaction.
But, like, punching a wall in... I don't know. The other part, which we kind of talked about before, with, like, when they have to keep filming, his reason for continuing, like, okay, Cliff filming him because he's, like, having supernatural powers. You're a dick, but I guess I could buy it, but you are exploiting your friend for clicks on your YouTubes or whatever. What I absolutely could not buy was why Derek would continue filming to honor Cliff's memory.
But, like, you're filming all these horrific moments.
It feels like something like an influencer YouTuber might do.
But that's why I was, like, questioning, like, whether this was, like, meant to be a commentary on that, like, 2013 vlogging, like, recording everything must be documented, clickbait culture.
The reason why I'm struggling to believe that that might be a commentary is because I think these two people who made this actually did have some sort of, like, YouTube skit channel.
The beginning parts, where they're, like, sort of setting, like, they're having the party and they're sort of, like we're watching the vlogs as if we are the audience, and they're, like, super edited, they're just, like, explaining the situation, are just, they felt like parody a little bit. Like, enough that, like, I was prepared for this to be, like, making fun of somebody who would do something like this. Like, bro, you're dying. We don't need to see you die, actually. Like, if you want to show, like, all the pasta you're eating in Italy, fine. But I don't need to see this man suffer. for your vlogs. Especially because they're his friends. Like, they had that whole party. Like, all your friends are watching you screaming, crying, and throwing up right now.
I mean, I guess, like, when you're traveling with your guy, you have, like, less concerns about going off with a random girl you don't know. But, like, I am very, very paranoid about going off with people I don't know in general, just no matter what their gender is. But, like, his friends didn't seem that concerned that he was going off with this girl he knew all of maybe 15 minutes. And then they found him bloodied up, and they weren't like, we need to call the police because I think she assaulted him or, like, did something to him. They were like, clean yourself up and let's go to the next country.
There was a point at which, like, he just simply needed to go to the hospital. And, like, the only thing I could think was, like, being a vampire isn't illegal.
I mean, the government would definitely, like, seize him.
I mean, good. At this point, he's a killing machine. They need to. Like, he's uncontrollable.
What didn't make sense to me is, like, even when they were like, let's rob the ambulance and stuff, I thought it would have made more sense for them to, like, break into a hospital or go to a hospital and for him to, like, go into their blood supply.
They were literally in front of that cart of blood. They were in front of a cart of blood and didn't take it. They were like, let's Grand Theft Auto the ambulance. It's so deranged.
I'm stupid. I also just don't, like, honestly, if I felt like I was going under this transformation, I would keep it under wraps. And they were like, let's do the most illegal thing I can possibly think of and hijack an ambulance. I was like, what kind of thought process? Like, this is not
Let's
GTA.
say you get in the blood, he's full of blood for a while, he's good to go. Now what?
Yeah.
Now what? And also, they've incriminated themselves by filming their entire route, their entire plan, where they're staying, where they're hiding. I don't know at what speed he's uploading these videos or if they all get uploaded after, but I'm like, it's beyond, it's without logic. They're acting on no impulse, not even.
But I feel like it's like a part of it that makes it feel like it's a commentary, and with this is like there's no way that they can have this much nonsense going on without it being like maybe they're doing it for the content because they feel like it's what's interesting to be watched and not going by logic anymore. Because I'm like, logically the best thing would have been just to go to the hospital and take some of the blood donation stuff that they use for blood transfusions. But for some odd reason, like, that never even came up. They just went for, like, the most over-the-top explanations for everything.
Or even when he like, cuts his hand and tries to, like, give Derek the blood himself, like, from himself, and he goes, like, Derek, I got it. The man had less than a Capri Sun's worth of blood in that jar. Also, why are you having an open wound around a vampire? It's beans for brains. There's no other explanation for it.
I mean, you have a great point. That was just so tense. And I was like, I simply would not do that. Like, I don't want, okay, let's say your blood could sustain him for a while. I don't really want to train my new vampire friend to have a, like, taste for my own blood specifically.
I would simply peace out. Like, it's not like he can fly and find me. I would politely be like, yeah, I got you, and take the next flight out. As soon as they actually came up to the conclusion that they needed to kill someone, and they were both like, yeah, this is fine.
That's why I felt like this was, like, giving more of a thriller, because I feel like thrillers are more likely to ask you to, like, suspend your disbelief for the sake of, like, the action that follows. Like, and the action is fun. It's like POV, you're Edward Cullen running through Italy and the Volturi is chasing you. Like, that's what it was like.
And this movie felt very similar to, like, Jake Gyllenhaal's character in Nightcrawler, where, like, they definitely felt villainy. Like, it's not like he was fighting hard to, like, have to not kill people. He was
Edward
like,
did it first.
Let me find a blood bank or something. Him and his friend came very quickly to the conclusion that they needed to kill people, and they were not very discriminate about who it had to be. It was just they didn't necessarily find anyone in time. And the way that, like, then when they realized that he was hungry and they didn't realize that there was probably like a time period before he became like ravenous and indiscriminate about who he kills, was also dumb. Like, clearly when you lose control, like, I mean, you get hangry if you go like 12 hours without eating and you're not a vampire. So if you go days without eating and you are a vampire, you're starving, like, clearly something's going to happen. But they just were not coming to that conclusion. And this movie also felt like a bit like It Follows in a way. They have like he kind of came to like the same conclusion of like, let me just find people who are disposable for society. And so the whole like who to pass it to, because he ended up passing it to his friend, and finding disposable people to society to contract your disease or to kill felt very like It Follows.
And this girl was like, I chose you because I thought you were dying. So yeah, I said that this film is like It Follows meets Spring, and plus the Italy location. I thought it was very similar. Also, I thought it was, again, kind of like It Follows, well, exactly like It Follows. There's that strong like STI metaphor, like how he gets it is by hooking up with this random chick in a bar, and then he also immediately deduces that it was in fact her. I mean, to be fair, he's not far off from doing that because he woke up with like scratches and stuff or whatever, but like they don't once consider like food or whatever, like something strange that I ate. It's like, it was that girl, I got it from her, she has a cure, this constant emphasis on a cure that we've all kind of thought, why is he so hell-bent on curing vampirism?
When he like takes her friend or whatever and puts him in the chair and is like, I'm gonna tie you up here until she like comes to save you, felt very like It Follows and like setting a trap for the creature and everything. However, I feel like they just went about things in the dumbest way the entire film. I don't know if they actually did think to make it a commentary of like how far people go to create content. At no point did they make logical decisions. Everything just seemed like it was to make the situation like more exciting for the viewer to watch.
Even when Derek makes his final video right before he dies, I'm like, what makes you think you owe anything to your audience right now? Like, it was almost like, okay, here's the grand finale. And like, that is what also like bugged me about the structure of the movie. I thought it ended 3-4 times. They had so many places where it could have had like a solid, well-rounded ending, and then there was just more plot. And I'm like, it's still going. I thought it could have ended after Derek offed himself. I thought it could have ended before he like started hunting pedophiles. I thought it could have ended on a cliffhanger. Like repeatedly they kept having these like finales, and then I realized, I'm like, oh, it's because the audience is expecting to see what happened and like how this concludes. Like the audience, the like vlog audience. Not that it's on purpose. I don't like that it did that. It frustrated me that it kept going.
But you're making it seem like it was more thought out than it like was.
YouTubers will make like an apology video, and then they'll make a follow-up apology video, and then they'll be like reacting to your comments on my apology video. So it does feel very much like how people always expect more, even when there is like a finale for something. There's like this constant desire for more content and more instant gratification.
Well, my thing is like, after Derek dies, why is Cliff making snuff films now? Like that, like I'm confused. Like why? Like even if you're seeking justice or you're doing whatever, or you're gonna continue to live your life as this like moral vampire or whatever, why are you filming it? Why are we still filming it? I think the Jake Paul thing is what brought this into horror. Like the 100%. Like people were really inspired.
It was
by
Logan
that.
Paul who went into like that forest. Logan Paul literally filmed that forest where people have been seen to, or many people have gone to commit suicide.
Here's another movie that someone can steal. It's up for grabs. Just do a good job with it. Is if someone does like a TikTok horror type film where there's like a trend, where there's like an audio trend, but when you play the audio, you unleash something, and like every person that it does, it's just they all die. And then some people figure it out, and they're like trying to beat it and figure out how to decode the audio or whatever to figure out what's inside of it.
The ring meets TikTok. I like it.
Because there's ways to use social media and like new media outlets in a fun way in horror. But I think like sometimes the social commentary just doesn't land because it either comes off like too girl bossy, too traumatic, or like too, you don't understand how humans work.
Like I said before, there's so much opportunity now because we have so many other forms of camera, or like I think the thing that like is being missed out, and because found footage is always like after the fact, and we don't emphasize that. Like I think live tweeting, live vlogging, like Instagram lives are like a huge source of like horrific things could happen on any of those, and like a really interesting way to play with the audience, because we engage with things as they happen. Everything happens so quickly, so that there's something less scary about like I'm watching this after.
I feel like it's very shocking that no one's did like When a Stranger Calls meets Instagram Live, or someone's Instagram living while they're doing some sort of event, and then someone comes on and starts making creepy comments and like can see them, and it feels very like the call is coming from inside the house.
I guess Cam Girl is kind of like that.
I'm gonna be straight up and just say I don't really like any social media horror. I find it corny, cheesy.
I like searching
stupid.
because I felt like it made me feel creepy about.
That's not
social
horror.
media.
That's like a thriller, which is fine. That's fine. I'll leave searching where it is.
But I feel like people just don't use it well. I feel like the way that they use it doesn't feel like real to how people use things.
It's also too temporal for me. Like, I feel like trends, like you said, the Snapchat movie, you're like, that's even late for Snapchat. I like things move on too quickly because like by the time the movie's made, by the time it's promoted, by the time it's released, by the time it's received, you know.
But there's some things that are like timeless in terms of like Facebook is still like timeless per se.
Yeah, but even like they have little functions that evolve within the app. I just feel like there's too quick an evolution to make something that I'm going to be that engaged with. Like I was engaged with like desktop horror or paranormal or Blair Witch. You know what I mean?
There's not enough apps that I feel like go viral enough for there to be an app horror movie and be like, oh, this is a widespread app that people are downloading. Because like the last thing that I remember being insanely popular was like Among Us and Temple Run, and those are games.
Oh my god, Temple Run. Yeah.
But it could be interesting to see like filmmakers make up a platform and like teach us the rules of it and how people use it. It doesn't have to literally be something we're familiar with.
Because I think that's what makes Black Mirror was scary, because like the whole nosedive episode did feel very real to like how Instagram and social media feels, with like the likes and the validation and the comparison and the obsessing over people you don't really know's lives. That felt very real to social media, but those like vague feelings around it, and they didn't necessarily take like the exact app design. They even actually enhanced it, which I think is like sort of what you're saying, Louisa. By the time stuff comes out, you're like, this isn't even how the app works anymore. So like if they just if they updated it and be like, oh, like you can do X functions now, like that might work. But it's just like the way that I think people do technological horror that just does not work well.
It misses.
Well, it's super interesting to see, like, I mean, we did touch on this during the desktop horror, but like technology has always been a part of horror. Like even if it's like a phone call, when we were talking about Black Christmas, and like the technology of the Ring and like the VCR, and like it feels like it's bound to have this natural evolution, and it feels, and it is corny right now because they're trying to show us something that we're living in presently, so like it doesn't feel authentic. But I do think there is a lot of potential, especially if they do that Black Mirror thing of like future thinking of like what a world could look like and catastrophizing it in that way.
For sure. I do think, yeah, they can take it in interesting directions, but like we're kind of getting at, they're just not imaginative enough, or they're far too literal, and they're sticking like to this dogma of an app that's going to be irrelevant by the time the film's released. It's like, why would I care about this?
I think they did try to switch, because there was like that movie with like a voicemail, like one missed call, but honestly I don't remember what that movie was about. I just remember the name of it. But like now, like no one really has house phones anymore, so like When a Stranger Calls and stuff feel less scary, because you're like, well, I haven't not been in a house recently that has a house phone, so I'm like, who's gonna call from the house? You can call me from your cell phone that's also in the house that I would hear, but like you can't call me on a house line from inside the house.
From within my house. But there's so many scary things about technology. Like if somebody put a tracker on the bottom of my car or something like that, could trade, like if there was some indication that like I got a notification that somebody had been like tracking my location, that's the same feeling as the calls from inside the house. I think people are just like not being super creative.
Because like formulas are so successful, I think people are not necessarily going as far out the norm as they could with new technology. Like dreaming up at some new updates for an app so it doesn't feel outdated when it comes out.
Imagine if somebody hacked your like Google Maps or your GPS and like sent you walking in the wrong direction into a trap. Like I feel like there's so many things that like have potential scary factor, but they're only using things that like actually happen. I mean, I'm sure these things do actually happen, but yeah.
I think this is a commercial a commercial impulse to be like, I'm gonna put out the trendiest horror. What's current right now? It's this app. Okay, horror with this app, horror with this thing, horror. And it's just like, there's no imagination and it bores me. That's why I haven't really wanted to watch the app horror, which is the natural latest evolution of found footage.
Yeah, there's so many, like, recently I think we've seen like a surplus of horror films that have been like breaking the norm of how successful horror is, like with Hereditary and Midsommar and Get Out and Us. And that's because those are so imaginative and they are very different from what everyone else is releasing. I feel like the market is concentrated with like the Conjuring universe, like the Blumhouse. I should figure out how to pronounce that.
I was about to say, just call out Blumhouse if you mean it.
But like they make a ton of different movies, but they're all sort of the same. Like they like to make adaptations of movies from the past, like they do Fantasy Island, and then they work with like streaming platforms to make like a bunch of different horror movies.
And they make them really fast.
It's horror movie fast fashion.
Exactly. It's satisfying in the way that fast fashion is, and that like, okay, like this outfit will do for tonight. Yeah, I was entertained, but I'm never gonna watch it again. Like, I think that's what they're like churning.
They don't make you think, but I think the part of horror is like how are you portraying this public fear, this deep-rooted primal fear that people have? What is the metaphor? How are you creatively portraying that? And I just feel like there's not really any of that right now. It's just like, you know what's scary? Possession. Let's make this thing. You know what's scary? This is scary. You know, there's no like thought process behind it, and it bores me.
There's some studios and distribution companies that are really making big leaps in the type of horror that they put out, because I do think it's a genre that deserves to be awarded more, especially like an award show season. I don't think the confines of films that deserve awards should be drama. There's some amazingly acted comedy films and some amazingly acted horror films, and they get absolutely no shine.
On Google, it calls like Paranormal Activity horror thriller, and I hate when they do that. I know that horror and thriller cross over a lot, but I feel like Paranormal Activity is horror, and like, why are we calling it thriller? But they just do that to films which are like horror films which turn out to be quite good. They'll call a thriller just to avoid
That's so funny.
the kind of cheap association with horror. And I'm like, just call it a horror, call it what it is, and celebrate it for that. Like, horror can be intellectual. Horror often is intellectual commentary and stuff, and like profound, but no one wants to treat it as
thrillers
such.
are more likely to be like throwaway, no deeper meaning nonsense movies.
Yeah, or like psychological thrillers. They'll call it a psychological thriller, and I'm like, it's a horror movie. That's fine. Thank you for listening to The Monstrous Feminine. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, SoundCloud, and Spotify at The Monstrous Feminine Podcast, and on Twitter at The MonFemPod. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts to be our next Witch of the Week. We also have a TikTok. Follow us at The Monstrous Feminine Pod for podcast clips and more fun. Brooms up, witches out.